Yo guys, it's Mighty, and in this video I want to talk about the best medium speed pad on the market right now. This is of course the Padsmith Crucible. I've been really enjoying this pad over the last 2 weeks I've been trying it. If you guys have not subscribed yet, only 95.6% of you guys are actually subscribed. So if you guys could subscribe, it would mean the world to me. Also, I bought this pad with my own money, so all of my thoughts and opinions are of course my own. This pad is closer to the slower end of the speed scale. It's not quite as fast as something like an Artisan Raiden or a Speed V2, which I will be comparing this pad to later in the video, but it is relatively fast and I am able to track pretty well in this in all sorts of tracking games like Apex, Overwatch, and COD. And this pad is very enjoyable, which basically makes it that when you have to move your mouse, you do have to apply a force, but when the mouse is actually in motion, there's a little bit less dynamic friction. But of course, you can see that the mouse comes to a pretty nice stop. So if you are looking for a pretty balanced pad and you don't want something super fast, what I hear that most people compare this pad to is the speed of an Otsu. I think this pad is pretty good for you. When it comes to the actual surface feel, this surface is pretty softly textured. It's nothing harshly textured like a Heian or an Aqua Control Plus. Arm sleeves don't catch on this pad at all since the texturing is very soft. So I've tried all sorts of sleeves, from wallhack to TJ exclusive, and all of them work perfectly fine on this mousepad. When it comes to the actual stitching on this pad and how the surface is made, it's one of the most unique feeling surfaces I've ever tried on any type of mousepad. The surface is kind of strange. I'll show a close-up of what the actual stitching on the surface looks like, and it does provide a unique glide experience when you run your hand or your mouse skates over it. Makes the pad surface feel a little bit more rough and a little bit denser, even though it's still a relatively soft pad. The version that I did get here is the mid version, so it is about 3.5 millimeters thick, and it does provide a pretty dense glide. The surface doesn't really compress in very much, but I wouldn't say it's to the level of mid like an Artisan mid, but it's still definitely a denser pad than let's say a soft or an exzachtt. You definitely do feel the feedback of the actual surface on the skates themselves when you do run your mouse over them. When I do use donut skates, which is the primary skate that I used on this pad, I do feel the surface texture, as well as when I use normal dots, the surface texture does come out even more. If you do want no surface texture and a fully smooth glide, I would recommend getting full skates. Right here I have some Atlantis mini skates, and this makes the pad feel completely smooth without any surface texture. One thing that I do notice is that these larger skates do slow down quite a bit more than the dots or the donut variants would. So that's just something to keep in mind when you do use this pad. And none of the design aspects of the pad actually make it feel inconsistent at all. It's a very consistent glide experience throughout the entire pad. The actual text on the bottom right of the pad is slightly raised above the surface, so if you do run your mouse over it, you will definitely feel it. When it comes to the stitching of this pad, the stitching is very slightly below the surface of the pad. I didn't feel my arm or sleeve catch on the edge of the pad at all, and the stitching is very small and very dense, so I have absolutely zero problems with the stitching itself, and I do think it's very high quality. It's one of the best stitchings I've ever seen on a pad, period. One thing that I really enjoy about this pad is its amazing alpha cell base. This alpha cell base makes this pad stick to my desk a lot, and it doesn't move at all. If you do have issues of this pad sticking to your desk, just spray down a little bit of water or just put a few drops around the entire base of the pad and this pad will stick like magic. One thing to note is with the larger size, the 1000 by 500 millimeters, is that the base is rubber, so you will have a slightly different feeling of the base on that pad. The base on that pad is also 3 millimeters thick, so it will have a different glide and surface feel than this one. Now to compare this pad to similar pads in its speed variant. Of course, first as the main benchmark for this pad, this is the Artisan Raiden Mid. The Raiden is smoother than the pad and of course much faster, as well as having a denser base than the Crucible. So overall the Raiden is a much faster experience and a much nicer experience in the speed variant of mousepads. The Raiden does have a very fine surface texture. It's very light and very soft, and there's a very similar kind of surface texture on the Crucible itself. However, the Crucible does have slightly more texture. For the glide themselves, the Raiden is basically very fast, but with the Crucible there is a decent amount of stopping power. Now comparing the Crucible to a newer speed pad on the market, the Lethal Gaming Gear Neptune. The Neptune does have very similar properties to the Raiden. However, I do think the Raiden is a little bit more firm than this pad. I will be releasing a full review of this pad later on, so keep your eyes out for that. The speed of the Neptune versus the Raiden are pretty similar. However, the Neptune is a good deal faster than the actual Crucible is. The Crucible does have a good amount of dynamic friction, while the Neptune has very little. The Neptune is also a very smooth pad. I do think it competes with the smoothness of a Ninja, so that kind of smoothness difference is very noticeable when comparing these two pads. Last but not least, we have the Infinity Mice Speed V2 in the Jakku color. This pad does have very low dynamic friction, as well as a very interesting surface feel. This surface feel is a very fine, hard texture, which means you don't really feel it on your mouse gates or on your wrist. However, with the sleeve, it does catch a little bit. However, the Crucible does have a little bit softer of a surface texture and has, like all the other pads that I've compared it to, much more dynamic friction. The dynamic and static friction on the Speed V2 is much lower than the Crucible, so that does create a very fast glide experience. Very fast glide experience on the Speed V2. The Speed V2 surface texture is a little bit harder than the Crucible is, so that creates a very interesting glide experience where the Speed V2 on your mouse gates and on your wrist feels perfectly smooth, while on the Crucible you do notice the surface feel. Out of all the speed pads that I own, the Crucible is among the slowest of the speed lineup. I do feel like this pad is the perfect balance between control and speed. It's a very balanced pad that has very unique surface properties, and I do find that I enjoy this pad a lot. If you do play a tracking focused game like Apex, COD, Overwatch, games like if you do play games that are more faster paced and tracking focused like Apex, COD, Overwatch, games like that, and you do want a pad that's not quite as fast as some of the fastest on the market, like the Raiden, Neptune, or Speed V2, I think this is the perfect pad for you. If you do want to buy this pad yourself, I'll have a link down below. You can also use code Myden, which I will also have his code down in the description below if you do want to check out this pad yourself. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, peace.